Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! Within the dimly lit attic, Arthur navigated through cobwebbed keepsakes and yellowed remnants of time. His mission, assigned by his parents, involved clearing out this neglected space, a task long overdue. The room's atmosphere buzzed with memories, each one tied to a different box or trinket gathering dust. As he wrestled with an aged trunk, a sudden flash of vibrant pink grabbed his attention from beneath a heap of dusty papers. Intrigued, he reached for it, his fingers brushing against the luxurious material of an old dress. This wasn't just any dress. It was his sister's prom gown. He remembered the night she had twirled in this very dress, the beads on the bodice sparkling under the ballroom lights. A strange feeling washed over him, a mix of excitement and nervousness that he couldn't quite explain. Glancing around furtively, even though he knew he was alone, Arthur made a split-second decision. He quickly shimmied out of his jeans and t-shirt, carefully stepping into the gown. The silk whispered against his skin as he pulled it up, fumbling with the zipper at the back. Finally secured, Arthur turned to face the small mirror propped against a stack of boxes. His breath caught in his throat. The dress hugged his frame in a way he never expected, accentuating curves he didn't know he had. His auburn hair, normally cut short and practical, seemed to soften his features when paired with the feminine garment. "Wow," he whispered, running his hands down the sides of the dress. It felt right, natural, as if he'd been waiting his whole life to see this version of himself. For several minutes, Arthur stood transfixed, turning this way and that to admire the gown from different angles. A car door slamming in the driveway jolted him back to reality. Panicking, he quickly stripped off the dress and returned it to its hiding place, heart pounding as he tugged on his own clothes. That night, lying in bed, Arthur couldn't shake the memory of how he'd felt in that dress. It awakened something within him, a longing he'd never acknowledged before. He found himself browsing online clothing stores, fingertips hovering over images of flowing skirts and delicate blouses. Over the next few weeks, Arthur's curiosity grew. He started small, ordering a simple sundress in a soft floral print. When it arrived, he waited until the house was empty before trying it on. The fabric was light and airy, skimming his knees as he twirled in front of the mirror. He felt a rush of joy unlike anything he'd experienced before. Emboldened by this success, Arthur began to expand his secret wardrobe. A flowy maxi skirt in a deep emerald green, a crisp white blouse with lace detailing at the collar. Each new item felt like a step towards something more. As summer turned to fall, Arthur's collection grew. He scoured thrift stores and online boutiques, always careful to have packages delivered to a discreet pickup location. His room became a haven of hidden femininity, dresses tucked between winter coats, makeup tutorials bookmarked on his laptop. One chilly October evening, Arthur sat cross-legged on his bed, surrounded by an array of cosmetics. He'd been practicing for weeks, following online guides to perfect his technique. Tonight was the night he'd put it all together. With steady hands, he applied foundation, concealer, and a touch of blush to his cheeks. His eyes, normally hidden behind thick-framed glasses, were accentuated with subtle eyeshadow and mascara. A swipe of pale pink lipstick completed the look. Arthur stared at his reflection, hardly recognizing himself. The person looking back at him was softer, more delicate. It felt like seeing his true self for the first time.
"Nora,"
he whispered, trying out the name he'd chosen weeks ago. It felt right on his lips, a perfect fit for this version of himself. Over the next few months, Nora began to take shape. Arthur ordered breast forms and hip pads, learning to create a more feminine silhouette under his growing collection of dresses. He practiced walking in heels, starting with small kitten heels and working his way up to sleek stilettos. As winter settled in, Nora's wardrobe expanded to include cozy sweater dresses and elegant evening wear. Arthur found himself living for the moments when he could transform into Nora, reveling in the freedom to express himself fully. One snowy evening, as Arthur carefully applied winged eyeliner, he made a decision. It was time to take Nora out into the world. He chose a simple black cocktail dress, pairing it with tasteful silver jewelry and low heels. His auburn hair, now grown out slightly, was styled into soft waves framing his face. With a deep breath, he grabbed his coat and stepped out into the night. The local art gallery was hosting a winter exhibition, a perfect opportunity for Nora's debut. As he entered the warmly lit space, Arthur felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. He moved through the crowd, sipping champagne and admiring the artwork, hyper-aware of every glance in his direction.
"Excuse me,"
a soft voice said behind him. Arthur turned to find a woman smiling warmly. "I just had to tell you how much I love your dress. It's stunning." Arthur felt a rush of pride and relief. "Thank you so much," he replied, his voice pitched slightly higher than usual. "I'm Nora." "Pleasure to meet you, Nora. I'm Emma. Are you an art enthusiast?" For the next hour, Arthur lost himself in conversation with Emma, discussing favorite artists and techniques. It felt incredibly freeing to interact as Nora, to be seen and accepted as his true self. As the weeks passed, Arthur found more opportunities to let Nora shine. He joined a book club, attended poetry readings, and even took a beginner's ballet class. Each outing boosted his confidence, helping him refine Nora's persona. Spring arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal. Arthur stood in front of his mirror, carefully applying mascara. He'd come so far from that first moment in the attic, discovering a part of himself he never knew existed. The black dress he wore was a far cry from his sister's prom gown, tailored perfectly to his figure. His auburn hair, now shoulder length, was swept into an elegant updo. As he slipped on a pair of pearl earrings, Arthur marveled at the transformation. Nora wasn't just a character he played anymore. She was an integral part of who he was, an expression of his truest self. With a smile, he grabbed his purse and headed out the door, ready to embrace whatever the future held. As Nora stepped into the warm spring evening, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey from Arthur to Nora hadn't been easy, but it had been incredibly rewarding. Each day brought new challenges and discoveries, but she faced them with growing confidence. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she made her way to a nearby cafe. It had become a favorite spot for people watching and working on her writing, another passion she'd rediscovered as Nora. The barista greeted her with a friendly smile, already preparing her usual order. "Evening, Nora? The usual?" "Yes, please. Thank you, Tom," she replied, settling into a cozy armchair by the window. As she sipped her latte, Nora opened her notebook, pen poised over a blank page. She'd been working on a series of short stories, exploring themes of identity and self-discovery. Writing had become a cathartic way to process her own experiences. Lost in thought, Nora didn't notice the woman approaching until she spoke. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Looking up, Nora met the warm brown eyes of a stylishly dressed woman with a kind smile. "Not at all. Please join me," Nora replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. I'm Olivia, the woman said, extending her hand. I couldn't help but notice you writing. Are you an author? Nora felt a flutter of excitement. It was still a thrill to introduce herself, to be seen and accepted as her true self. Nora, she replied, shaking Olivia's hand. Well, I'm trying to be. Just working on some short stories at the moment. That's wonderful, Olivia enthused. I'm actually part of a local writers group. We meet here every other week to share our work and offer feedback. Would you be interested in joining us? The offer was tempting, but Nora felt a momentary flash of anxiety. Joining a group would mean sustained interaction, building relationships. It was one thing to have casual conversations as Nora, but could she maintain it long term? Taking a deep breath, Nora made a decision. She'd come too far to let fear hold her back now. That sounds lovely, she said with a smile. I'd be delighted to join. Over the next few months, Nora's world expanded in ways she never imagined. The writers' group became a cherished part of her routine, providing not just creative feedback, but also a sense of community. She found herself opening up more, sharing parts of her journey through her writing. One evening, as the group was wrapping up, Olivia pulled Nora aside. Hey, a bunch of us are going to grab dinner at that new Italian place down the street. Want to join? Nora hesitated for just a moment before nodding. I'd love to. As they walked to the restaurant, Nora found herself engaged in easy conversation with her newfound friends. The anxiety that had once plagued her in social situations was fading, replaced by genuine enjoyment of these connections. Seated at a table draped in crisp white linen, Nora smoothed her black dress and looked around at the smiling faces of her companions. She felt a surge of gratitude for how far she'd come, for the courage it had taken to embrace her true self.
So, Nora.
One of the writers, a kind-faced man named David, began.
We've all been dying to know. What inspired you to start writing?
Nora took a sip of water, considering her response. Well, she began, I suppose you could say I was inspired by a journey of self-discovery. She paused, gauging the interested expressions around the table. You see, I haven't always been... Nora. A hush fell over the table as her friends listened intently. With a deep breath, Nora began to share her story, from finding the dress in the attic to her gradual transformation. As she spoke, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. This was the first time she'd openly discussed her journey with anyone. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, to her amazement, her friends erupted in supportive comments and questions. Olivia reached across the table to squeeze her hand, eyes shining with admiration.
Nora, thank you for trusting us with your story, David said warmly. You're incredibly brave, and we're honored to know you.
Blinking back tears, Nora looked around at the accepting faces of her friends. In that moment, she realized that she'd found not just a writing group, but a true support system. As the evening wore on, filled with laughter and heartfelt conversation, Nora felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. She was Nora, writer, friend, and woman, fully and unapologetically herself. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Encouraged by her friends' support, Nora began to live more openly as herself. She updated her wardrobe, replacing the hidden stashes of clothing with a curated collection that truly reflected her style. Her auburn hair, now grown past her shoulders, became a point of pride, styled in elegant waves or chic updos. One sunny afternoon, Nora stood in front of her full-length mirror, admiring her outfit for an important meeting. She wore a tailored navy blue blazer over a crisp white blouse, paired with a pencil skirt that hugged her curves. Her makeup was subtle but polished, emphasizing her natural features. As she applied a final touch of lipstick, Nora marveled at how far she'd come. The nervous, uncertain person who had first tried on that pink prom dress seemed like a distant memory. In her place stood a confident, radiant woman ready to take on the world. The meeting was with a local publisher who had expressed interest in Nora's collection of short stories. As she entered the sleek office building, Nora felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was a dream she'd harbored for years, one that had seemed impossible before her transformation. "Ms. Nora Evans?" the receptionist called, smiling warmly. "Mr. Bradshaw will see you now." Taking a deep breath, Nora smoothed her skirt and walked into the office. Mr. Bradshaw, a distinguished man in his 50s, stood to greet her with a firm handshake.
Ms. Evans, it's a pleasure to meet you in person. I've been thoroughly impressed by your writing.
As they discussed her stories and potential publishing options, Nora felt a surge of pride. She was here, living her truth, pursuing her passion. The journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge had led her to this moment. After the meeting, which ended with a promising offer for her book, Nora practically floated out of the building. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying as she texted her writing group the good news. Within minutes, Olivia had organized an impromptu celebration dinner. That evening, surrounded by friends at their favorite restaurant, Nora raised a glass in a toast.
"To new beginnings,"
she said, voice full of emotion. "And to all of you who've supported me on this incredible journey." As cheers and congratulations filled the air, Nora felt a sense of completeness she'd never known before. She was living authentically, pursuing her dreams, and surrounded by people who loved her for who she truly was. In the months that followed, Nora's life continued to blossom. Her book of short stories, Reflections, was published to critical acclaim. She found herself invited to literary events and book signings, opportunities she embraced with growing confidence. One particularly memorable evening, Nora stood at a podium in a packed bookstore, reading an excerpt from her most personal story. It was a thinly veiled account of her own transformation, filled with the fear, joy, and self-discovery she'd experienced. As she finished reading, she looked out at the sea of faces. Some moved to tears, others nodding in understanding. In that moment, Nora realized that her journey wasn't just about personal growth. By sharing her story, she was touching lives, possibly helping others who were struggling with their own identities. After the reading, a young person approached her, hands trembling slightly.
"Your story. It's like you've written my life," they said softly. "I've been so scared to be myself. But hearing you, seeing you up there, it gives me hope."
Nora felt her heart swell with emotion. She reached out, gently squeezing the young person's hand. "There's a beautiful, authentic version of yourself waiting to emerge," she said warmly. "And when you're ready to let that person shine, you'll find there are so many people ready to support you." As she signed books and chatted with readers, Nora reflected on the incredible path that had led her here. From that first moment of trying on the pink silk dress to standing proudly as a published author, every step had been part of her evolution. Later that night, as Nora prepared for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves around her face, and her eyes sparkled with contentment. She no longer saw any trace of Arthur in her reflection, just Nora, in all her authentic glory. With a smile, she picked up her journal and began to write. There were more stories to tell, more experiences to share, and Nora was ready to embrace whatever the future held, secure in the knowledge that she was finally, truly herself. As the weeks turned into months, Nora's life settled into a new rhythm. Her days were filled with writing, speaking engagements, and cultivating the deep friendships she'd formed. She'd even started mentoring other transgender individuals, sharing her experiences and offering support. One crisp autumn morning, Nora stood in front of her closet, contemplating her outfit for the day. Her wardrobe had evolved significantly since those early days of secret dresses hidden among winter coats. Now, it was a carefully curated collection that reflected her personal style, elegant, feminine, with a touch of vintage charm. She selected a burgundy sweater dress, pairing it with black tights and ankle boots. As she applied her makeup with practiced ease, Nora thought about how far she'd come in mastering these once daunting skills. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was confident, radiant, and undeniably feminine. Her phone chimed with a message from Olivia. "Don't forget, brunch at 11. Can't wait to hear about your big news." Nora smiled, excitement bubbling up inside her. She had indeed been sitting on some significant news, waiting for the right moment to share it with her friends. Today felt like that day. At the cozy brunch spot, Nora was greeted with warm hugs and excited chatter. As they settled into their seats, she couldn't help but marvel at the group around her. These people who had become her chosen family, who had supported her through every step of her journey.
"All right, Nora,"
David said, leaning forward with a grin.
"You've kept us in suspense long enough. What's this big news?"
Taking a deep breath, Nora set down her coffee cup. "Well," she began, unable to keep the smile from her face. "I've been offered a book deal. A major publisher wants me to write a memoir about my transition and everything that's come after." The table erupted in cheers and congratulations. Olivia reached over to squeeze her hand, eyes shining with pride. "Nora, that's incredible! Your story is going to help so many people!" As her friends peppered her with questions about the book and the writing process, Nora felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. This was more than she ever could have imagined when she first discovered that pink prom dress in the attic. Over the next year, Nora threw herself into writing her memoir. It was an emotional journey, reliving the ups and downs of her transition, the fears and triumphs, the moments of doubt, and the joys of self-discovery. She wrote about the first time she ventured out as Nora, the thrill of being recognized as her true self, and the challenges she faced along the way. As she neared the end of the writing process, Nora realized that her story was far from over. Every day brought new experiences, new growth, new understanding of herself and the world around her. Her transition hadn't been an endpoint, but rather the beginning of a lifelong journey of self-discovery and authenticity. On the day her memoir was released, Nora stood in front of a full-length mirror, preparing for her first major television interview. She wore an elegant emerald green dress that complemented her auburn hair, which was styled in soft waves. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting her natural beauty. As she gazed at her reflection, Nora thought about the person she used to be, the scared, confused Arthur who had stumbled upon that pink dress in the attic. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that version of herself that everything would be okay, that an incredible life was waiting on the other side of fear. "You ready?" Olivia asked, poking her head into the dressing room. She'd become Nora's unofficial manager, helping her navigate the suddenly busy world of a successful author. Nora took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be," she said with a smile. As she walked onto the set, lights blazing and cameras rolling, Nora felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was where she was meant to be, sharing her story, offering hope to others who might be struggling with their own identities. The interviewer, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, greeted her warmly. "Nora, thank you so much for being here with us today. Your memoir has been touching hearts across the country. How does it feel to have your story out in the world?" Nora smiled, her voice steady and clear as she began to speak. "It feels incredible, Patricia. When I first began my transition, I felt so alone. I never imagined I'd be sitting here today, able to share my experiences with others. If my story can help even one person feel less alone, less afraid to be their authentic self, then I'll consider it a success." As the interview continued, Nora spoke candidly about her journey, the challenges, the joys, the moments of self-discovery. She talked about the importance of support systems, the power of self-acceptance, and the ongoing nature of personal growth. "What would you say to someone who's questioning their gender identity right now?" Patricia asked. Nora paused, considering her words carefully. "I would say, be patient with yourself. This journey is uniquely yours, and there's no right way to do it. Surround yourself with supportive people, seek out resources and communities that can offer guidance, and most importantly, listen to your heart. The path to your authentic self might be challenging, but it's incredibly rewarding." As the interview wrapped up, Nora felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her. She had come so far from that first moment of trying on a dress in secret. Now, she was openly sharing her story with the world, offering hope and understanding to others on similar journeys. Leaving the studio, Nora was greeted by a small crowd of fans, many holding copies of her book. As she signed autographs and chatted with readers, she was struck by the diversity of the group. People of all ages, backgrounds, and identities, all touched by her story in some way. One young person, hands shaking slightly, approached her last. "Your book. It gave me the courage to come out to my parents," they said softly. "Thank you for sharing your story." Nora felt tears prick her eyes as she hugged the young person. "Thank you for being brave enough to be yourself," she replied. As she walked away from the studio, Nora felt a profound sense of purpose. Her journey hadn't just been about personal transformation. It had become a beacon of hope for others. She had found her voice, her truth, and in doing so, had created a ripple effect of authenticity and acceptance. That evening, as Nora prepared for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her auburn hair framed a face that was unmistakably feminine, but more importantly, unmistakably her. She smiled at her reflection, feeling a deep sense of peace and rightness. The journey from Arthur to Nora had been long and challenging, filled with moments of doubt and fear. But standing here now, Nora knew without a doubt that every step had been worth it. She was living as her true self, pursuing her passions, and making a difference in the world. As she drifted off to sleep, Nora felt grateful for every part of her journey, from the discovery of that pink prom dress to the publication of her memoir. Each experience had shaped her, had brought her closer to the woman she was always meant to be. And though she knew there would be more challenges ahead, more growth and discovery, Nora was ready to face whatever came her way. She was Nora, writer, advocate, friend, and woman, fully and beautifully herself.
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.